Welcome to another DEFCON Bros podcast. It's your host, Craig James, here with Nick No, my co host. And you guys were in for a big episode today. But before we get there, I want to start by letting you guys know that if you're not subscribed to this channel, please make sure you subscribe. All you got to do is click this button right here where it will say subscribe. But then you got to make sure you click down and click to all. That way you get all the notifications when these videos are posted. It's pretty simple, but it does make a difference. So make sure you go do that. Also, you can follow me over on Twitter at justinform1. But with all that, I want to welcome to the show our co-host. You guys know him. Benghazi whistleblower, military intelligence insider, U.S. Air Force veteran, all-around great guy, and co-host of the DEFCON Bros podcast, Mr. Nick No. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks, Craig. I'm excited to be here.
As am I. I think we have a lot to cover in today's show, starting with one of the biggest stories that's going around the country as we speak, and that is the Jeffrey Epstein saga continues. Epstein now, in these newly released emails from House Democrats, claims Trump spent hours with one of his victims in a trove of shocking emails, as is put here by the Daily Mail. Now, to get a better idea of this story, I want to go over this New York Post article where it talks about Trump asking Ghislaine Maxwell to stop recruiting girls from Mar-a-Lago as part of what's being disclosed in these emails. And I want to read a few excerpts of the emails in this article. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start here. The emails that are being released by the House committee, which will show a few of them here on social media. The House Oversight Dems have received new emails, apparently, from Jeffrey Epstein's estate that raise serious questions about Donald Trump. And here are the emails. Let me see if I can make these even bigger. So this is one of the emails, and this is probably the most prominent one, where you have Ghislaine Maxwell sending this to Epstein, and they're having this conversation. And this is where it says one of the important parts. It says, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim, the name was redacted here, spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned before, it says here in the article or in the email. And the article goes on to talk about this specific email, but it's outlined pretty well here by the House Oversight Committee, where it asks this very serious set of questions. It says, why did Democrats cover up the name when the estate didn't redact it in the redacted documents provided to the committee? It's because this victim was Virginia Giuffre, who publicly said that she never witnessed wrongdoing by Trump, and Democrats are now trying to create a fake narrative to slander President Trump. That's the official story, but it gets even worse, right? So other exchanges that were selectively released, and let me remind everybody out here, these articles are being selectively released, right? There's no entire trove. They're cherry picking emails that make it look as though Trump's guilty to release to the public. And let's look at some of the dates here, okay? January 31st, 2019. This is an email between the author of a series of completely controversial and debunked garbage, hoax extension books against Trump. Michael Wolff is talking to Jeffrey Epstein, which is 6 months before Epstein's arrest on federal sex trafficking charges. And they're saying this. Trump said he asked me to resign, Epstein told Wolff. I was never even a member, talking about his time at Mar-a-Lago. Of course he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop, says Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is all coming out, right? And I want to focus on this and get your take on it here real quick, Nick. But this is all coming out in light of some other stories that we're going to get into in today's show. But if I'm reading this as somebody who understands the law and understands how these things work and understands who Jeffrey Epstein really was, the email exchange that they're saying is really the smoking gun, is not the one where Virginia Giuffre is referenced, because they redacted her name. So obviously they don't want that part of the email out there, because that undercuts their whole story, because Virginia, who was a prominent witness who recently passed away, probably a
Hmm.
witness protection program, said that Trump wasn't involved in anything illicit or illegal. So that one you can kind of almost disregard. But then the other emails they decide to release are the 2019 exchanges where Epstein knows and Wolf know that the FBI will be seizing these communications at some point in the future, right? They
Hmm.
know that this is going to be going into the possession of the federal government. So they're saying things that seem to incriminate Trump. Why? Well, I'll let your imagination, ponder that one. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's obviously if you're an Israeli Mossad asset, as Epstein I mean, there's so many articles published about it at this point. There's probably, I think there's 6 or 7 that I've seen, saying that he's tied to it. And then, of course, the last picture he ever had was him wearing an IDF shirt. Come on. Anyway, so this guy has some foreknowledge of what's going on, and it'd be really easy to start trying inserting things and insinuate whatever, and just be really vague about it. And my favorite thing that I saw there that you just showed, Craig, is that it said victim where it had it blacked out. It said victim. Okay, that's a trick of the mind right there because they don't even know who it is. And then, like, oh, a victim, that means there was a crime. You can't have a victim without a crime, Craig, or like an offense. And so what that's implying is that there was a crime or offense that happened and there was none. And so that's a lie. They're going to get sued again. I'm sure of it, whoever did that. And I think at this point, anything that they try and throw up at Trump is going to be turned around on them. He's very good at that. And I expect that to happen really soon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a second part to these emails that was interesting. And I want to share this portion of the email exchange because I think it does also bring up some interesting questions. In this New York Post article, it goes on to cite um, Wolf when he says, I hear CNN planning to ask Trump, again, these are the 2019 emails, planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in Scrum afterwards. If we were able to craft an answer for him, Epstein answered, what do you think it should be? Huh. If we were able to craft an answer for him, Wolf says this now, where it gets weird. I think you should let him hang himself, answered Wolf. Hmm. Going on, quote, if he has, or if he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt. Of course, it's possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed under the Trump regime. So I want you to take this and really examine it for a second because think about this, Nick. That's clear. That's clearly evidence that they were orchestrating a way to use the information being exchanged in these emails and the information that was being brought up through the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein to frame Trump.
Exactly.
So if
They
anything,
explicitly
like
said
yeah,
it.
like they literally just released exculpatory evidence for Trump, and then and this is where it gets really insidious, though, Nick, because the way our media works is it's like the wrap-up smear, where you release evidence, whatever it is, then you use the evidence you released to frame a narrative against somebody that may be completely outside of the truth of the story itself, but because you release the story, you control the story. They control the puppets on the mainstream news. They control the narratives, right?
Public Relations 101. You have to get ahead of the story, be the first person to publish something about it.
And that's exactly what this is. Now, in the next story I want to talk about, this goes into the Clinton corruption files, which are now being released. Now, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel have unleashed a new trove of evidence about the Clinton Foundation, and it's bad. It's actually quite bad. And I say that with regard to the level of influence that was being bought by foreign entities. And this is funny because and I'll pull this up here real quick, but I literally just made a video about this. If you guys haven't seen my new series here, the Q clearance series, which is right here, you need to go watch it because I'm doing a sort of short form series on all of the Q drops. And the first post I put up was about Alice in Wonderland, which were some of the first drops ever released by Q, which were exposing the connections between Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and Christopher Steele, and the dossier, and the influence peddling, and buying off influence in from foreign governments to keep the effort to try to, for instance, undermine foreign nationals' nuclear programs like North Korea and Iran, and Iran one, or what was it, Uranium One, all of that. It's all tied to that moment in time when that was happening, and it's interesting that that's the case. But here is the story itself. Pam Bondi and Cash Patel are releasing this evidence. They've told Just the News, and this is John Solomon's site, that documents were transmitted to the Senate Judiciary Committee in recent days and detail numerous instances of foreigners and even a U.S. defense contractor seeking to curry favor with the Clintons through donations to their family charity, including when Hillary Clinton served as Secretary of State and Bill Clinton was the President of the United States. Now, Nick, I don't know about you, but I find it oddly interesting that this like wrap up smear with the Epstein emails comes out the day after. Pretty much you have this trove of evidence being flooded into the US Senate Judiciary Committee that seems to implicate that the Clintons were part of all of this, right? And we know who was the biggest, member of the Epstein, Mossad, whatever it was, spy ring, blackmail operation. It was Bill Clinton. He was the one on the plane. So, in typical fashion of the left, accuse you of what they're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the weirdest part about this, Craig, look, when you're working for the government and you have a security clearance, you're not allowed to accept any money. I mean, you could maybe they could buy you lunch if it's less than $10 or something. If there's a certain amount of money you're allowed to have, even, as a don't like, given to you, and it has to be less than $100. Okay. So the fact that she received any money like that at all is indefensible as the Secretary of State. And, there's no way to get around that for her. That's the main point I wanted to make about that. And
I agree. I agree. And I want to finish some details in this story here real quick. Okay, so we have the documents, right, that are coming out. They're saying that not only are they going to outline this influence operation that was being run, uh, but that there has been an effort to obstruct legitimate inquiries into the foundation for years now. It was reported not too long ago here on Just the News that the FBI had three separate investigations into possible pay-for-play allegations against the Clinton Foundation that were all closed after Obama Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates ordered it to be shut down. So, look, at the end of the day, if Cash is really trying to get to the bottom of all this, and Pam is, they're going to throw everything they can with the whole Trump Epstein thing at the wall. And I mean, at this point, Nick, with the Epstein stuff, I think we all know what it is. It's an intelligence operation. People go, well, why is Cash Patel spiking it? Why is Pam Bondi spiking it? Why aren't they releasing it? What do you want them to come out and say? Oh, Israel is running a spy ring with the CIA of high level politicians in the United States. There's national security implications to all of that, and it has to be handled a certain way. Am I crazy for understanding that?
yeah, and I think personally that President Trump, he mentioned briefly at an FBI speech, he said that he's making them go back to the original mandate, which doesn't include espionage, counterintelligence, and so on. But I think that Cash, this has been something like fifth generation warfare. I don't know if you've seen the social media and everything. There's been all kinds of stories that are like head fakes, look over here, not here kind of things. And then all of a sudden they publish these things. So I think that, obviously the Clintons, they wanted to keep them from thinking anything's coming or the other people involved. And I think some weird stuff's going on. And at this point, I know that Cash has this as a priority, those two cases as a priority. And I think that there may be a delegation of those powers before, like the investigations of espionage and so on, given to the military. So when they ask about Jeffrey Epstein, he has to be like, yeah, he died. Or he asks about, ask about something that's state secrets. the FBI is no longer involved in that sort of stuff. I mean, unless it's to protect something internal. But so if when they ask about Charlie Kirk's assassination, yeah, it was this shooter guy. You know, they have to do that. They have to. It's national security. They have to lie if it if people are on the scent of an investigation or whatever it is, or at least try and be generalized and keep people away from it. So I think it's a lot of a like a tango that's happening right now. It's a little dance.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's sort of my opinion of it. And you have to sort of at least acknowledge that that's a possibility, particularly if you understand how these things, how all of this, if everything is true that people are saying, you don't just come out and say it. You can't. Again, it's to Nick's point. If it's being, especially if it's been commandeered by some other higher level authority or branch, what if there's some sort of, implementation, like he said, of military investigation there, then, or the military involvement, and they deem it classified under national security? Well, Cash can't say anything, but it's not keeping people from going after Cash. And this is a weird story. I don't know how well this ties into it, but Cash Patel has had some interesting things happen over the last several days, weeks, and months, including this story about his girlfriend. And I want to pull this up. This is coming out of the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal's website here, where the story is as follows. Cash Patel's girlfriend has filed a $5 million lawsuit against a podcaster, namely Elijah Schaffer, for an insinuation that she's a Mossad honeypot. Now, I read through this article and I saw sort of some interesting things in it that I want to pull up and talk about. But basically, what's happened is the podcaster Cash or Elijah Schaffer posted a tweet where he made some insinuations, right? The lawsuit that's been filed uses a couple of interesting tactics. First of all, the suit took aim at Schaffer because he, quote, frequently posts anti Israel rhetoric accusing Israel of controlling the United States and its politicians. And again, to be clear, this is a law firm that is behind this lawsuit that is, it runs Cash Patel's organization, his foundation, and it's representing his girlfriend in this suit. So it is tied directly to Cash. And you can see here, Elijah says Trump doesn't want to admit that Netanyahu doesn't fear him. Israel has more control over the U.S. than we do over them. Our politicians are hook, line, and sinker sold out to the Jewish state regime. It's genuinely disheartening. We must remove these parasites from APAC. Not the most controversial thing I've ever heard, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But this is the post that they're seeking damages from. So Elijah Schaffer posts a picture of Cash Patel and his girlfriend, and it's a quote. It's attached to a quote tweet attached to a post here where it says Mossad sent female operatives deep into Iran, seducing top officials, infiltrating government surveillance networks, and carrying out sabotage missions. In one of the most audacious operations in history, Mossad deployed dozens of female operatives into Iran earlier this year. Well, I don't know that there's anything I've seen that's too. I don't think he's done anything wrong. I mean, I don't know that I agree with the insinuation, but as is said here, Schaefer's lawyer, O'Neill Lopez, or I don't know how to say that, Lopez, has said this is a slap suit, which is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. He says it's very troubling when government officials, girlfriends are suing members of the media for posting third party comments. He also said, if you, and this is his lawyer for Schaefer saying, quote, if you're the director of the FBI, you're holding the nation's secrets and in national intelligence, and we should be skeptical about your relationships, especially if it's an uncommitted relationship like a girlfriend. He commented, it's perfectly fine to raise questions, and Elijah didn't even do that. So it goes on here in this to point out that there are other people involved who are being targeted. Others, including Kyle Seraphin, the guy who just broke the story or helped break the story with Baker over at the Blaze on the January 6th pipe bomber, possibly being the Shawnee, I forget her last name. You guys, we talked about that story here on the channel before, but the Capitol police officer who's allegedly being named as a possible suspect as the one who was planting the pipe bombs and shooting the protesters with pepper spray balls before or on January 6th. But Kyle Serafin's been sued, and also a former congressional candidate and America First nationalist Sam Parker is being sued as well. Now, the only thing that stood out to me in the rest of this article was this part here, where it honed in on the fact that the employer of Kash Patel's girlfriend um, is a conservative pro-Israel, um, is the CEO, I think, of the conservative pro-Israel outlet PragerU, Marissa Straight, who lists herself in her bio as a former member of Israel's Unit 8200 cyber spying division. So that those are the facts of the story as I've seen it, and like was said by the lawyer for Schaefer, I don't think questioning these relationships is unreasonable given the position he's in and the fact that, as was pointed out in this article, her former employer claimed to be a member of Israel's Unit 8200 cyber spying division. I mean, am I missing something here, Nick?
Yeah, so this is kind of like weaponization of and protection. I don't know. It's bizarre. Something's off about all of it because if you're a public figure, then it's very hard to sue someone for libel because you have to prove actual malice. You can do that through discovery or whatever. But even then, most people would not, say, hey, let's get this guy like Jeffrey Epstein did when he says, let's set up Trump,
Well, in all
But
fairness, I'll point this out. Cash's lawyer, or not Cash's lawyer, Elijah Schaefer's lawyer, did point out that this, if he pursues this lawsuit, it will open discovery up to his personal communications with his girlfriend, Cash Patel, that is. So he said that will become fair play if they do decide to take this to trial.
something big is gonna brew out of this. I don't know what it is, but some sort of enormous nugget's gonna be discovered from this, I think. If you think about it, like I was saying, if you're a public figure, then it's very hard to sue for libel, for slander or whatever, because especially if they're a public figure that works for the government. So the fact that Cash you're like you said, we are allowed to scrutinize our people that are in government. And that is 100%, and this is through like law, like case law and
Well, the
all of it.
argument would be that
Yeah.
his girlfriend is not in the government, therefore she is not.
And she have to show that she's not a public figure, which is impossible to do because she was in an advertisement. And I mean, for I don't know, I've seen this advertisement that she was in. I'm so like
Well,
that
she was like an
alone.
aspiring country music singer too, so she
Yeah,
is
that's a
sort of a
public
public
figure. It's so
figure
it's
unto
very
herself.
difficult to prove actual malice. They'd have to have like text messages to say, yeah, let's set him up. And I don't know for sure, but let's get him. They would have to say something exactly like that.
Well, this kind of ties into the next story I want to get into, which is something you brought to my attention. And we've had these new revelations. For instance, the UK has just come out and said that they are not going to support intelligence sharing within the Five Eyes, including the United States, because of the United States actions in the Caribbean against these drug runners, right? And and again, I don't know how well tied in it is to all of it, but an article that you pointed out and shared with me here had some very interesting things to say about it, about Cash Patel and what's going on within the FBI. Let me pull this up here real quick and share it on screen. So basically, there's a special relationship that's been in the works since 1946 and what was, the post World War, joining of intelligence agencies called the Five Eyes. And in this article, they outline some interesting facts that and it talks about that. It says this partnership expanded, but it started with the United States and Great Britain and expanded to include Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And they go on in the article. It says all rely heavily on American intelligence to help keep their country safe through the FBI. Or though the FBI is a criminal investigation agency, it is also a major part of Western intelligence gathering community. Alongside other U.S. agencies like the CIA, the FBI has offices and embassies around the globe. And there's this write up here by the Yorkshire lass, which talks about the fact that the UK is being investigated by director Kash Patel. And this ties into everything we've seen happen. And they point out that the UK is the main instigator for creating the Russia collusion hoax, which we know through Christopher Steele, Perkins Coie, Fusion GPS. But in other words, the UK, along with others that are a part of the Five Eyes, spied on Trump in 2016's campaign out of a US embassy out of London. And our intelligence agencies like MI5, MI6, GCHQ, and our government knew and were involved in extraditing information to Barack Obama, who ordered John Brennan and Gene Haspel to run Russiagate out of the city of London. Now, our intelligence agencies are being investigated by the Trump team, according to an article in the New York Times. So it goes on, and this is where it's interesting. It says, so not only do we have the exposure of the BBC editing a Trump speech during January 6th in a Panorama documentary, which is massive 2020 U.S. election interference, which I don't know if foreign countries can interfere in elections necessarily by, whatever they're doing. It's a foreign nation. They're going to do what they do and inciting violence, and the exposure of Starmer and the UK government meddling in the 2024 US election. We now have exposure coming out that the UK ran Russiagate. They were spying on Trump's 2016 campaign, which was running out of the US Embassy in London. So, and remember, what do we know about all of this, Nick? We know that they were using the Five Eyes to obfuscate US law. That's why all of the intelligence sharing was happening outside of US borders, so that when we go to investigate it, we can't get any information because it's all classified as state secret, national security. It's all tied to intelligence agencies and their dealings with their agreements that are outside the purview of the US government, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's basically what the United States has been doing since that time where you pulled up the article where it said everything formed. They made a partnership, just to make sure they could watch each other's back, but that turned into instead of watching each other's back, it's like, hey, will you help me go jump this guy? That's what they're doing. Instead of actually following the U.S. law where you have to have probable cause to collect intelligence on people and so on. They use the Five Eyes. They'll say, "Hey, UK, why don't you go ahead and do this for us, and then we'll just take your word for it or whatever." Yeah, that's what they do, and even assassinations, for that matter, oftentimes is done that way. If they can't kill their own citizens, they'll ask, a foreign nation to do it, and it's gotten out of control. It's spiraled and gone out of control. They've tried to have a coup they threw against President Trump, and it's said that they're responsible. UK, yeah, maybe they started the RussiaGate thing, but look what the media did. The media ran with it, and they knew it was a lie. They had to have. At least I believe many of the media, articles and everything that was written. There's no way it wasn't a coordinated effort. It was like they were all briefed at 3 a.m. or something on what to publish that day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. General Flynn put it this way, just talking about generally speaking, Russia collusion, right? We're talking about how this all ties back to the fact that these things were orchestrated in London. And what they do is, in the same way Nick just described, they will task the London, you know, um, point of contact in their intelligence agency, their Five Eye contact, say, we need information on these U.S. individuals. We can't collect on them because our law says it's illegal, and we would have to go get a FISA section, what is it, 702, warrant, and we can't do it because then they'll know we're looking. So, but you have the capability to spy on these people's conversations. So you go collect the evidence and then bring it to the embassy for a meeting. And then when we sit down to have a meeting, you just open up your folder and we'll happen to be sitting across the table. And if we see it, that, then we see it. And then maybe if you need information on citizens in your country that you want to spy on, we can spy on them for you and then open a folder on a desk and let you walk in and sit in the room and interview with them for a few hours, right?
Exactly. Maybe that's why Obama kept visiting that building over there.
Yes, and Obama was just at the prime minister's residence. There was at 10 Downing Street in the UK. So that's what they are doing. That is literally the scam. That is the scheme. That is the conspiracy that they tell us we're crazy for pointing out. That's how they would do it if they did it. I mean, it seems pretty easy. Let's listen to General Flynn. I want to play this clip real quick.
My shot to James Comey is, James, do the right thing and help save this country, right? If you did something to undermine this country, which it appears that you did, and there's an abundance of evidence, don't try to wait it out because there's some subversives inside of the Department of Justice in various districts that are going to help you out there, buddy. Do the right thing for the future of America. You will then be remembered as somebody who actually did the right thing at the right moment in history, and you took the higher moral high ground to do the right thing and to say the right thing. You know what, Jim? That's what you need to do instead of, allowing your ego and your arrogance to drive you down into the bowels of hell, because that's where you're going to end up.
And your parting message to Peter Strzok, who put you under the gun and framed.
Yeah, he goes on to give a message to Peter Strzok, but the more important one was what he was saying to Jim Comey, which is that you guys need to get for lack of a better term, your shit together and stop doing this. Stop furthering this conspiracy. Stop thinking you're going to get away with it. I mean, but again, we're dealing with people whose arrogance is only outmatched by their ego. And this is a great example. All of the top spies, including John Brennan previously, coming together. Just remember, this is how they feel about the deep state. Listen to this.
Impeachment inquiry is underway, sparked by a complaint from someone within the intelligence community. It feeds the president's concern and often used term about a deep state being there to take him out.
Thank God for the deep state.
So there you go. I mean, that's John Brennan and a bunch of former, intelligence officials there telling us, hey, thank God for the deep state, because that's how we frame Trump for crimes he'd ever committed, right?
Yeah, never mind the crimes that we committed. We're doing it for the just cause, baby, because Trump's the bad guy. Didn't you guys see the documents that we provided, to the media? I'm sure you guys did. Yeah, he's the bad guy.
Speaking of documents being provided to the media, that's kind of takes us to our last story here, which is James Comey and the incredible story that continues with him, where you have Comey's attorneys now reportedly doctoring transcripts in his perjury trial. Yes, he is still in court fighting this perjury, fighting these perjury charges that are tied to the fact that he was leaking information to the press, exactly what you were just saying, Nick, to get out to the public these narratives that were then spun up and run as the whole Trump-Russia hoax, right? In presenting the evidence in a motion to the court, James Comey's legal team altered 2 words in a transcript of his 2020 Senate testimony to make it seem as if Ted Cruz asked Comey a key question he didn't actually ask him during the hearing. Now, of course, they point out here that you cannot alter words in a transcript as presented. That's constitutes fraud. But yeah, so
I'd say that's pretty corny of Comey to do that.
Yeah, go look up. You want to talk about altered documents? Look up the whole corny saga where, because an R and an N lowercase put together looks like an M, they purposefully misspelt James Comey's name as James Corney in a number of official documents so that when people would file for FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests for certain documents that pertain to the Russia hoax, they would file using Comey's last name, but it would not pull up any results because his name is spelled Corney instead of Comey. So that's a whole nother saga. That's a whole nother can of worms for another day. But again, this is all just fostering more psychotic behavior. Here's actor Woody Harrelson fantasizing about murdering President Trump with cyanide in a completely detached and unhinged rage comment that we see here. We also have Antifa, and I guess that was from a few years ago, but this was not. Antifa has violence and arrests at Berkeley as they were protesting, quote unquote, a TPUSA event as they mocked the death of Charlie Kirk and violently smashed each other's faces in, and protesters smashed the conservatives. And yeah, just peaceful stuff that you would expect to normally see, right, Nick? But this is what they do. They foment the derangement And then when it happens, they throw their hands up and say, "Oh, well, this is where we're at."
Yeah, and then they take that media headline and spin it, and then someone else takes it and then weaves it a little differently, and before you know it, it's like telephone. It's a completely different message that's all propaganda.
I agree. So with that, I mean, that's pretty much our final story for the day. So Nick, final thought for the day before we wrap it up here.
My final thought for the day: this isn't over for James Comey. I think we're going to look into maybe James or Lisa Barsoomian and some other people later on down the road, because I'm not sure who the mastermind was about changing the names for FOIA, but I think that she represented him and several other people, to include Obama, Hillary, Bill, and some other prominent people, and she worked for the CIA and also is married to the Deputy Attorney General. Um, Forgive me, what is his name? I remember he was the acting for a moment.
Rod Rosenstein.
Rod Rosenstein. So we'll see how this all wraps up, because those guys are all, you know, um, involved with each other and giving each other advice. At least I think so. I think maybe they might be some coming out with that.
I think you're right. All right. So with that, we always wrap up with some scripture. Today's no different. I want to share these words. This is Romans 12, 20 and 21. And this is how we should react to all of this, friends. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For in doing so, you will be heaping fiery coals upon his head. Do not be conquered by evil, rather conquer evil with good. And that's what I want to leave as a message for all of you out there. Take that with you, share it. Also, make sure you check out our good friends at God's Feeding Station, which is an online ministry that if you haven't checked out yet, I want you guys to check out. There's a link in the description. They have Bible studies, daily devotionals, daily scripture, all kinds of amazing content. We're so thankful to be partnered up with them. And I hope you guys go check them out, godsfeedingstation.org, or they have an app under the name God's Feeding Station you can download whenever you want. But thanks to them for being a sponsor. And that's it. That's where we're going to leave it. So thanks to all of you guys out there watching. Thanks to everybody. Make sure, again, you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. Thank you to all of you guys out there who support this content. And make sure you hit the like button and share it and subscribe. And we'll be back on the next episode of DEFCON Bros whenever it comes out, which it's like a weekly episode. So we'll be out next week. Until then, I'm your host, Craig James. Nick No, say goodbye.
And this is Nick No. I'll get you next time too.
Godspeed and God bless each and every one of you, Patriots.